All right, we're just listening to some testimony from the defendant himself, Jason Van Dyke. As we wait for the verdict to come in, we're told the jurors have reached that verdict, and it will be announced in 45 minutes. Meanwhile, the city of Chicago has been preparing. Some schools have said that they are going to dismiss early. Others said they may have to go on lockdown. R.J. Mangone is an attorney, and he's been in the courthouse for us. He's watched almost this entire trial. R.J., can you tell us what's happening as we wait for the verdict to be read?
Well, it started this morning with a hearing just on the possibility of throwing a contempt charge at the defendant because he wasn't available last night when the jury came in with a question. And it seemed pretty mundane, nothing huge. And then noise started, just rumblings right around lunchtime. And then I got word that a verdict was going to come in. And I walked out of the courtroom and wound up actually having a discussion with lead defense counsel, Dan Herbert. He and I have a mutual friend, so we were talking about that. And I asked him how the defendant was doing, and he said, not well, which you can imagine. He's got to be terrified out of his mind. Especially, I'm sure Mr. Herbert had a heads up as far as this verdict, because if I had one, he must have had one. And his client knows that quick verdict, and I know Dan knows quick verdict like this probably doesn't bode too well for him.
Well, you say quick, but they were still deliberating 7.5 hours. So, but I guess in the scheme of the trial, right, this trial lasted for several weeks. It was quite quick. Let's talk a little bit about Jason Van Dyke and what must be going through his head right now. Tell us what happened this morning. From what I understand, his daughter, Jason Van Dyke's daughter, was threatened while she was in school?
Yeah, they said, I think both of his daughters, but definitely at least one, there were some kids at the school, some high school kids that apparently said they were looking for her because they wanted to get her.
And she's young, right? She's pretty young.
Yeah, I think she's a teenager. I think it was the older one of the two. So, but she's like in her early teens, if I'm not mistaken.
Gosh, so tensions must be pretty high on both sides. Any sense of how the prosecution is doing right now and other community members who have been so vocal about this case?
Well, honestly, right now, I can't give you that. I can give you my own personal experience. Sure. I've gotten probably 25 to 30 phone calls. I had to shut my phone down because I was getting texts. Because everybody, just like I said the other day, by mere fact of me being here, people think I have some sort of inside knowledge, which I guess today I kind of did. However, when I walked out of the courtroom, I was talking to Dan Herbert, and I cannot tell you the tremendous amount of profanity that was thrown his way, and by association, my way, because I'm dressed, I'm wearing a suit, and there was a crowd of people just screaming, swearing at him and me.
Wow, and just so
I haven't seen before. I've seen them walk out, and I've heard comments, but this was a fairly good-sized group of people, and they were just screaming profanities.
So the anger and Dan Herbert, in case folks don't know, he's the defense attorney representing Jason Van Dyke, who I think, RJ, has done a pretty effective job considering the cards he's been dealt with in this case.
That's exactly it. I mean, when you have a videotape like this, you're really down. You're down already. I mean, you have so much ground to cover just to get back to even. And in this case, I don't think you can get back to even. The videotape kind of speaks for itself, and I feel bad in the sense for Dan, knowing Dan. But this is really a no win for him because of the fact that you have videotape, and no matter how you look at it, he, in my opinion anyway, he overreacted. The police officer, when you have your own partner panic or at least flinch when you shoot, that tells me that he was not counting on anyone shooting. I'm meaning Walsh, Joe Walsh, which is Van Dyke's partner. So no one expected anyone to shoot. If you look over my shoulder, I don't know if you can see right now, but if you look over my right shoulder, so it's
I'm looking.
the building right. You can see the building right behind me. There's snipers. Well, there's on the two buildings up there. There are police with rifles up there right now.
So tell us what happened, and then we're going to play the video. But just set it up for us, RJ. When the judge almost held Jason Van Dyke in contempt, what happened here?
Well, he told me you're not allowed to leave. You have to be here, which makes sense because of the fact if they're deliberating and they have a verdict, you have to be here for the verdict. I mean, you can't listen to it on the radio because if it's not a good verdict, it's like,
they got to put you in custody.
I'm getting the hell out of here. So you have to be here. And he did. He was upset. And I have to say, the judge he comes off very harsh sometimes, but he knows how big a case this is. And I think he has a sense that the verdict's not going to go Van Dyke's way. And he's been firm, but then he backs off because I think he understands. I'm sure he understands the situation.
Okay, so let's listen to that moment that happened in court when the judge kind of reamed at Jason Van Dyke and his attorney. Take a listen.
Herbert said, "Well, who's your source? Who told you that there was a valid threat?" And he said the school, and that's when Judge Gahn said, "So you want me to bring the school into court?" He said the building, something to that effect, and everyone started laughing. So he wanted to hear from an adult or a representative at the school that this was an actual serious threat, not just kids talking.
But again, it just shows you how high tensions are in the city of Chicago right now, as one of Chicago's police officers is on trial for the murder of Laquan McDonald. It's been a case that has been followed nationally. We are told that as the verdict is going to be read in about a half an hour, that schools have been put on standby, that protests could be planned depending on the outcome here. We're going to continue to closely monitor that. But we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Stay with us here on the Law and Crime Network. And welcome back, everybody, to the Law and Crime Trial Network. We are on standby mode in just a few minutes, actually about a half an hour. The jurors in the case of Jason Van Dyke are set to read the verdict. They have stopped deliberating. Right now, local law enforcement and other court officials, including attorneys, are getting ready. They're gathering. And I'm on the phone now with RJ, who's been with us for the last couple of minutes. He's on the ground in Chicago in front of the courthouse. What's going on? There's quite a bit of tension and fear that protests of sorts could break out. This verdict is scheduled to be read at 2:45, 1:45 Chicago time, and that's right when schools are scheduled to be let out.
Right. And honestly, the way the police, I've talked to a few police officers, probably 10, 15, and they're really concerned because they don't even, it's not a possibility. It's when protests happen. Now, the big issue is if he's found guilty of first-degree murder, some of the protesters, some of the leaders have said that they won't protest, that they basically will celebrate. But anything less than first-degree murder, and you've got a chance at second-degree murder, they will consider second-degree murder to be as good as an acquittal by their standings. So they will protest. But the police right now, the police and the fire department, they are assuming that there will be protests no matter what happens. And I'll tell you, I've talked to, like I said, probably 15 police officers just in the past day.
Wow.
And they're nervous. They're nervous. Everyone's wishing me well. I'm wishing them well. I mean, I've never been in a situation like this.
Wow. And RJ, just you're clear, so you explain to the viewers here. There was a specific jury instruction given by the judge that if Jason Van Dyke is if they do not believe he committed first-degree murder, they can find him guilty of the lesser charge of second-degree. How does that change? And you've said the civil rights activists, the protesters, have indicated that a second-degree conviction would not be enough for them.
Well, if he's found guilty of first-degree murder, he goes away for 45 years with no possibility of early parole, no time off for good behavior. He's got to serve a straight 45 years. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. So he's 40 years old, comes out at 85. It's basically a life sentence. And Jason Van Dyke has actually said, he's like, I'm looking at the possibility of going to prison for the rest of my life. He said that in an interview prior to trial. Second degree, I'm not sure, actually, because it's a police officer, and I'm not sure exactly what it would carry as far as time, but rest assured it's not 45 years. But if they come back with second degree, I think there's going to be a huge problem here. I'm certain he has not been acquitted. I am certain of that.
And my producer tells me that second degree carries with it probation to up to 20 years. So obviously there's a real possibility that even if he does get convicted of second-degree murder, that he could spend some significant time behind bars. Okay, R.J. Mangone, you're going to have to probably leave in a few minutes to make sure you make yourself available to go back into court, because I'm sure there'll be some lines getting in there, and I imagine security is heightened in terms of you having to go through metal detectors and all of that.
Yeah, I will tell you really quickly, the other night I actually was stopped, and there was a threat on last week on a nun and a priest, and I've been doing my live shot from up on top of a parking garage. They were under the impression that I was perhaps the shooter, and they saw me from the buildings over there. It was very bizarre to look up. That's how come I know the police shooters are up there, because I said, who said I've been up here doing stuff?
Wow, so you actually got questioned by police in your duties here of reporting to us here for Law and Crime.
Yeah, I was stopped. I let them search my car. I let them search me. I didn't care. I just didn't want to have a problem. But that's how, and this was a few days ago, that's how uptight things have gotten here. And I can only imagine it's going to get worse. So I think you're right. I think I should get in there, because it's probably going to be harder to get in right now.
Wow, well, we definitely don't want you to miss the verdict, but promise me this, RJ, please call us back as soon as you can get out of the courthouse. We want to hear from you what it was like to be inside the courthouse as that verdict is read. We're going to show it to you here live on the network, but of course, being there in person is quite different. So please be safe, RJ, and please report back to us what happens inside that court.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, let's move now back to more testimony from Jason Van Dyke. Again, as we lead up into the moments prior to the verdict being read, I think it's important that we review some of his testimony, because in a somewhat rare decision, his defense team decided to put him up on the stand so he could tell the jurors himself why he felt like he was in fear for his life. Take a listen.